Hello, my name's Terry Hess. As a podiatrist since 1993, I've always wanted to help our patients. The last 5 years or so, I've wanted to help us, the podiatrist, to make it better since these times are changing so rapidly, and now with COVID, even more rapidly. So my plan is to try to reach out and help all of us that I can to make it better, especially on the other side of what's coming our way, because I really think we have an opportunity to do a better job than we've ever done through telemedicine and just forward thinking.
Hi guys, I'm the Human Resources Coordinator for Foot and Ankle and Foster Family Wellness. So initially, I think when this all began, I'm pretty sure everybody's in the same boat. Nobody knows what's going on. Everything changes from day to day, but one thing remains the same is you have to have staff members at some point, whether it's 5 or 20 or 80 or however many staff you might have. The staff are in the front lines of your business, and they're the drivers essentially right now, because most of us that are in these roles are not able to be a presence in an office. Now, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I know for me personally, that's been a little bit difficult on my end, just because I am very interactive with my staff, and they usually come to my office multiple times a week. They have lots of questions. So initially, me providing information to them has been a little bit difficult just on that end. So when we began this and we were kind of sifting through what's going to happen and the budgets, we all knew that at some point we were going to have to start cutting hours. And when we sat down and talked about it as a leadership team, we all said, look, at this point, we're just going to have to streamline it the best we can and just be as transparent with the staff as possible. So if I can say anything right now, I can say that in doing this, reaching out to the staff and saying, hey, you know, hours are going to get cut. Things are going to change drastically, but that's okay because we're going to get through it together. And I'm going to walk you through the process. So in stating that, we looked at hours and staff and patients, and all that stuff came together, and we decided that if we were going to do partial employment or standby, we were going to do it based off of what was going to be more efficient down the road. Meaning that there are two ways you can do this with placing a staff member on standby or partial employment. Partial employment is if you can guarantee your staff member has 16 hours a week. If you cannot guarantee that your staff member is going to get 16 hours a week, you're going to have to place them on a standby status. But in doing so, we decided to do it in 2-week increments, meaning I would send them a letter stating that you're on now standby or partial standby status. This is your opportunity to apply for unemployment so that we can bridge the gap between you losing hours and you continuing to work. So, and in doing that, you have to be very strategic, because when I send them that notice, that's what they're going to give to unemployment. So we decided to do it in 2-week increments. So we made an Excel spreadsheet. So every time I sent somebody a notice saying you're now officially on standby, I would put the date I sent it and then the date I would need to resend the notice stating that they were on standby for another 2 weeks. Now, because of all this, standby usually works at a 4-week and an 8-week increment, but the government has now issued it up to 12 weeks, which is good, because that means we have more time to work with the staff. Also, when it comes to ESD, Employment Security Department, and unemployment, I don't know how you guys have been handling that, but I've been taking a majority of the questions with the staff and actually walking them through the process and giving them all the documentation. So what I did is I sent them out like the unemployment guide. I don't know how often you guys are visiting the ESD website, but at this point I'm doing it on a daily basis. So if I was to recommend anything, I would recommend to have a roster for your staff of who they need to reach out for what questions they might have, depending on what it is. If it's a clinical question, if it's, you know, an unemployment question, if it's a staffing question, they really need to know who they can talk to about specifics. And another thing is you have to be available to have these these questions be asked. So for me personally, with my staff, and I have 80 staff members, just so everyone's aware, I want to be available to answer any questions they might have about unemployment, about their hours, about their pay, at any point in time. If somebody says like, hey Marta, like I have a question about unemployment, how do I do this, how do I do that, I'm just going to send them the information. So the best thing that I can recommend right now is be as transparent as possible with your staff, with the upcoming changes that are going to be happening with your staffing, with your hours, and with unemployment. Unemployment right now is a mess. It's ridiculous. It's very frustrating for most. People are getting denied, and then they're getting called, and then they're getting denied again. All these things are normal, but they don't know that. So do your research, and I will leave my email in the comments box, and you guys can reach out to me with questions, and I can send you all kinds of documentations. If you haven't already started putting staff on standby or partial employment, if you don't have a letter, I can send you a letter template. I don't how many staff you have or how many staff you don't have. So I can't just pinpoint it just off of what I'm saying. So if I could recommend anything, it would be find a common ground of information to feed your staff. If you are reaching out to your staff on a daily or weekly basis and just sending them updates on ESD, Department of Health, OSHA, CDC guidelines, all this stuff is what they really want to know. And at the end of the day, your staff just want to know that you're there for them. If I could recommend anything, it's just making yourself known with your staff and saying, hey, I'm here to listen. I know that in branching out and networking a little bit with just some colleagues, some networking that I've been doing, the number one thing I've been hearing is my job does not tell me anything. They have all these meetings, they go into these rooms, they have these meetings, and I never hear anything from them. I want to quit, I want to leave. This is not how you do business. We want to branch away from that because our staff are very important to us. And when we get through this, we want our staff to come back to us. So just have an open line of communication. And
I've never not done much in terms of laying anybody off, so I'm a real novice at this. So what's the difference between partial employment and standby? And in terms of what you mentioned 16 hours a week. So does that mean like if someone at least is working 16 hours a week, they can go get partial employment, unemployment from the ESD? But if you put them on standby, that means they're not working at all and they can get full unemployment. Maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, that was actually Marta that talked about that.
Okay.
I'll let her, that's okay. I'll let her go ahead and expand on that.
So there's a couple different things when it comes to partial employment and standby. Partial employment, you have to hit 16 hours a week. Okay, so if you cannot guarantee 16 hours a week, I would suggest putting them on standby. Now, the way that standby works is it works like this. I send you a letter, I'm saying you're on standby, but that means a couple of different things. It means that you have to be available for me to call you into work whenever I say so, okay? It also means that you automatically get unemployment and you do not have to look for other employment while you are on standby. So it's a pretty strategic thing. So when we sat down and we looked at this, we said, can we guarantee the 16 hours a week? Absolutely not, okay? We can't guarantee 16 hours a week. So we decided to do standby. So I sent them a letter. I stated you're on standby, whether they were working 1 day a week at this point or 2 days a week at this point, I still could not guarantee that they would get 16 hours. So I told them, you're on standby. Please make sure to be checking your schedule regularly because we will be calling you in or you will end up on the schedule. Once they end up on the schedule, meaning once they're placed on standby and we're calling them back into work, they then have to do their weekly claim still, but they have to claim those hours worked. Does that make sense?
So like if you call them in the middle of a week or something and they worked half time, then they, or, you know, or let's, whatever, 15 or 20 hours, they have to report those to the unemployment. And then I assume they adjust the unemployment compensation down.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Now, but if they're on standby and there's no work at all that particular week, then they get their full unemployment. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, what
Yep.
happens if you say, oh, yeah, we can reduce you down to 16 hours a week? How does that fit into what they get in terms of unemployment?
So it's based off of what they work on an average. So if you have a part-time staff member, so, okay, here's the thing. So if you're in Washington State is 32 hours is considered full-time. So anything under 32 hours on an average is considered part-time. So if you have a part-time staff member, let's say they're working an average of 25 hours a week, okay? But now you can only guarantee them 16 hours. Unemployment will make up the rest of those hours that they don't accumulate at this point in time.
Okay,
If
but
you
if they're working 32 hours or more, they're considered full-time.
Yes.
And then they would just say, okay, you're full-time, you get whatever unemployment minus the 16 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think most of my staff do 32 hours, so that's how it would probably work. All right,
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
so more than likely what unemployment would do is, because if they're considered a full-time staff member, but they're still having a decrease in hours, meaning if you were giving them 40 hours and they're now only working 32 hours, even though that's considered full-time, they would still do an average and base it off of that average, meaning they would still be losing quite a bit of sum of money. So they would still base it off of an average. So even if they were 40 hours and now they're 32 hours, I would recommend with them moving forward with applying for unemployment.
Okay, I get that, yeah. And obviously the unemployment can look back in their records and see how many hours were reported on for, you know, whatever they look back to determine that. Got it. Okay, thank you. That was helpful.
Just to be clear, they still need a letter for partial employment to
Yes.
be able to get the unemployment? Okay.
I don't think that they absolutely necessarily will ask for it, but it's a good thing for your staff member to have just in case, because unemployment is so overloaded at this point, you guys, that the system isn't set up for this. So it's denying people. And, you know, as soon as you're like, oh my gosh, I can't pay my bills, I just got denied unemployment, your staff are going to freak out. Okay, I've been going through it for the last couple of weeks. They're not denied. The system just isn't, it's not set up for this kind of volume. So my recommendation is, because you're going to have unemployment reaching out to you, you're either going to have it through a phone call, you're going to have it through a letter, some form of something's going to come to you. If they can present that letter to unemployment even before unemployment gets involved, meaning contacting you, it's much easier to start with versus later. If you guys have any staff that ask you about licenses or anything to do with that, they are not requiring, DOH is not requiring that you have to have an active license or renew your license until September 30th of 2020. However, they will not waive any fees for that. So I told my staff today that it's absolutely fine if you can't afford to renew your license. Completely understand. I just asked them to reach out to me and let me know so that I could have a list, so I can make a list. Because I penalize my staff, I used to, if they let their license, if they let their license go, they would be taken off the schedule immediately. So I did let them know today that that wouldn't be happening, but that doesn't excuse them from making sure that they don't do it in the future. It just means that we are understanding that they're having a rough time with finances, and that shouldn't be their priority right now. Their priority is to keep working, keep their, you know, their self steady and take care of their families. That's their priority right now.
Thanks for watching. This is so important right now. We'd love to help, so please reach out to my CEO, Jolene, at jolene@anklefoot.net, and we'll do our best to reach back to help you guys through this crazy, crazy time. Thanks.